every single state in the US has had at least one serial killer. Today we're covering a state that is probably one of the most highly requested states since I started this series. Today I'm going to tell you guys about one of the most notorious serial killers from New York, and when I say that you guys have been asking for this one, I mean it. Before I begin, just know that this is a very long video. This is going to be another long one. There is so much to uncover. I think that my notes took me like 5 or 6 hours because there's so much here, and this has been going on for over 30 years, and they just arrested the guy like 2 years ago, and he's on trial now. Before I get into everything, if you're new here, this is a map of all the states I've covered so far. This is part 23 of the series, so we are almost halfway done. I'm going to try to do another highly requested state next, so stay tuned for that. But I'm going to get right into the story because, like I said, there is a lot to talk about today. And while I love long videos, I don't want this one to be an hour long. Grab a coffee, get a snack, whatever you do to watch these videos, get it now because this is going to be a long one. So today I'm going to tell you guys about the Long Island serial killer. And actually, if you look that up, a couple different people might show up. So more specifically, I'm talking about the serial killer of the Gilgo Beach murders. There actually is a new documentary that just came out about this. I watched it. I thought it was very good. I'm going to go over quite a bit of what's in the documentary, but if you want even more details, I think it's like a 3-episode documentary. So I think it's like 5 hours or something like that. I'm going to start the story on May 1st of 2010. A 24-year-old woman calls 911 and she's absolutely frantic. She is calling from the gated community of Oak Beach. This is in New York. And she says her name is Shannon Gilbert and that she's in Long Island and she needs the police. And you can hear her saying, "These people are plotting to kill me." The dispatcher also hears her start to shout, "Please stop it, please," and "No, what are you doing to me? What are you doing to me? Stop it." And this girl sounds absolutely terrified. It sounds like she's running, she's panting, she sounds scared. While this call is going on and she is running for her life, other people are calling the police saying that they are seeing some girl running from a man or that they are having a girl knocking on their doors asking to be let in. When the police arrive, an hour later, the woman is gone and no one knows where she went. So we know that this woman's name is Shannon Gilbert and she was 24 and she was actually working as an escort at the time. She was actually at a client's house. The client lived in the gated community that she had been calling from. So she had been hired from an ad on Craigslist and then people would contact her through that and that's how they would hire her. And so police learn after canvassing the area and asking people like what was going on, if anyone knew this girl, why was she in this community. They find out she's an escort and they also learn that Shannon lived about 90 minutes away and had her friend, a man by the name of Michael Pack, go with her and drive her. I'm kind of assuming he was kind of like her protection, like she would go in and do whatever she was hired to do and he was there to make sure they didn't take it too far and then be her ride back. I think he was kind of like her bodyguard essentially. So typically he would come with her, he would make sure everything is okay and then get a portion of whatever the payment was. So they learn about this from a guy named Joe Brewer. He's actually the guy that hired Shannon to be an escort. He says that he was going to have her there for a few hours. She arrived sometime around 2 a.m. at his house and a few hours before sunrise, while Michael's still waiting in the car, Shannon's inside with Joe. Joe actually came out and knocked on the car door and told Michael, "Hey, Shannon is like done. I want her to leave now." And she's not leaving. She refuses to leave the house. Joe says he doesn't really know why she didn't want to leave. She said that something was going to happen to her, that she was scared. He didn't know why. And Michael even came in and tried to get her to come out. And basically the next thing we know is that she's calling the police at 4:51 a.m. saying that they were chasing her. And she didn't say Joe or Michael were chasing her. She didn't say who. She just said they. And so they're like, is it Joe or Michael that's the problem? Is it someone else? Like, what is going on and where did this girl go? So they look around, they try to find her, they try to find Michael, they try to find the car they came in, and they can't find it. And it sounds like someone saw Michael leaving. And so once they realize that Michael and the car are gone as well, they think what happened is that Michael found Shannon, picked her up and took her home. And so they end up leaving and assuming that Shannon is fine. And we now know that Michael did leave, but he actually left after he had searched for Shannon for a while and couldn't find her. And he was confused about why she was like running around and yelling, and she seemed hysterical to him. And so eventually he gave up and just went home. And so Joe and Michael both don't know where she is, and the police don't either. And the police have stopped looking for her. But when Shannon never returns home, Shannon's mom, Mary, is like, something is wrong here, and she immediately contacts the police. Unfortunately, at the time, the police just kind of brush her off. They said she's a prostitute, she'd show back up, she's probably just out working, she's an adult, she'll be fine, like they're not really worried. And so she just gets brushed off, but Mary knows that something is wrong. Mary continues to advocate for her daughter and say like, I need you guys to look for my daughter. And finally, a month later, a whole entire month after Shannon goes missing, police finally bring an officer and a cadaver dog. The cadaver dog's name was Blue, and they start to search the area of the gated community. Unfortunately, at the time, they don't find anything. Like, her scent could be long gone at this point. It's not impossible for dogs to find a scent trail or find cadaver a month after, but it does make it a lot harder when it's an entire month later. So that really sucks that the only time they start looking for her is that much later. Other than that one search, they don't really look for her anymore. And so now at this point, Shannon has been missing for months. On what was supposed to be her birthday, her mom had a video on the news asking for help, saying that she will stop at nothing to find her daughter. She searched for almost 8 months. 8 months she searched for her daughter with virtually no help from the police. She was committed to getting Shannon's name on the news, making sure that her name was heard. And so she constantly would talk to the police, talk to the media, and like try to get Shannon's story out there. Finally, on December 11th of 2010, they start searching the area that she had gone missing. The police finally get involved and they research the area. And Blue ended up giving an alert down the beach a little ways away from this gated community, and they end up discovering a skeleton wrapped in burlap 8 months after Shannon had gone missing. And immediately they don't know who it is. And so they bring it back to the lab to start doing an autopsy and try to figure out who this person is and find out if it is Shannon. As they are doing that, they're searching the surrounding area for any additional evidence that might clue them into who this is and how they were killed. As they are searching, Blue alerts again, and they discover not one, not two, but 3 additional bodies. 3 additional bodies on the beach in this one little stretch of beach. 4 bodies in the area. And of course, they are wondering if any of these women are Shannon. That seems like the most logical assumption, is that one of these women has to be the person that was calling in peril in the same area. But as they're looking at these 4 unidentified bodies, they realize something. They know that Shannon had been in an abusive relationship, and at one point she had to get a titanium plate in her jaw because of how bad the abuse was from her boyfriend. And out of all 4 remains, none of them had a titanium plate in their jaw. So that means none of them were Shannon. So in their incredibly delayed search for Shannon, they don't find her, but they find 4 other bodies. And all 4 bodies were other women. And initially they're named the Gilgo 4 by the media and the public, and they're just set as Jane Does for a while. The police are trying to figure out who these women are, but they can't match them to any missing persons reports at first. And so the news, the media, the public, everyone is terrified right now. They don't know who these women are. They don't know why they were targeted. They don't know if there's more victims and if whoever did this is still out there. So everyone is terrified and everyone wants to know who these 4 unidentified women are. It takes a little bit of time, but finally all 4 victims are identified. They are Maureen Brainard Barnes, Melissa Bartholomew, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello. And they learned that all 4 of them worked as escorts or S-workers, and they all put ads online on Craigslist. When this hits the news and the media and everyone finds out who these women are, now people are worried that we're faced with another Jack the Ripper killer, because Jack the Ripper terrorized many, many women and brutally murdered many different S-workers because they lived a high-risk lifestyle and the police were not going to take them as seriously. Now people are worried this is happening again. And in the previous year, 2 other S-workers had gone missing in the area. So people are really, really worried that there is a very violent, brutal, awful serial killer, and who knows how long he has been operating in the area. So now I'm going to tell you guys about the 4 women that they discovered on the beach. So Maureen Brainard Barnes, she was 25 when she disappeared. She was from Connecticut originally, but she had gone to New York to try to be a model. And her sister had heard from her one night, like right before she disappeared, and she had called her sister saying like she wanted to ride from New York back home. And it ended up being too far for her to drive, so Maureen told her sister she was just going to take a train back home. And again, Maureen was also an escort and had advertised her services along with one of her friends. Her friend's name was Sarah, and they often traveled together to kind of protect each other. So they were in New York City together providing escorting services on Craigslist. And Maureen had 2 children. She had a son and a daughter, and at the time that she's in New York, she was worried about the possibility of losing custody because of her financial state. So she was very desperately needing to come up with some money to try to keep custody of her children. Her friend that had been in New York City with her was watching her like frantically try to get money. She was making some, but it wasn't enough. And Sarah, the friend, says that Maureen was very, very stressed about it. And eventually Sarah says that she decided she was going to head back to Connecticut. She didn't want to keep doing this anymore. Maureen said, okay, I'm going to stay until Monday. I'm going to try to get a couple more jobs, make a little bit more money, and then I'll head back too, because Maureen had to be back on Tuesday for a custody hearing. And so on Monday, July 9th of 2007, Sarah left while Maureen stayed behind again so that she could try to make a little bit more money. When this custody hearing comes on Tuesday and she does not show, her friends and her family are very alarmed, because one thing Maureen was not going to miss was a custody hearing for her kids. She cared about her kids so much, and she would do everything in her power to make sure she was there for them and that she fought for custody. Her friend and her family end up like going to the police, but the police brush her off. Again, they say she's an S worker. They don't really care. She's probably just doing whatever. They're disrespectful. They don't care about her. And so her family and her sister Melissa end up going searching for her in New York, but they can't get the police's help, and they couldn't even get her on a missing persons list. 2 weeks after Maureen has last been seen or heard from, Sarah, the friend, gets a call from a man. And he says that he saw her ad on Craigslist, and he asked Sarah if she's from Connecticut as well. And Sarah says yes, and the man says that he had met with another girl from Connecticut, and he says, do you know Marie? This is Maureen's escort name. Like, that's the nickname she went by when she was working. And so Sarah says, yes, that's my friend, but she's now missing. Like, no one has seen her. And the guy on the phone goes, oh, she's not missing. I just saw her at a whorehouse in Queens. She's alive and well. And so now Sarah, the family, everyone is excited. There's a chance that Maureen is alive. They were really basically assuming the worst at this point because she hadn't shown up for her kids. But if she's being seen alive in Queens, that's really good. Maybe they can go find her and she's okay. The guy that had called and said all of this used a blocked number, so they didn't know who actually had called, and the police couldn't track it. After this call and this glimmer of hope that maybe she was alive and them going and looking for her, they never found her and they never heard from her. And years pass. Her kids' birthdays pass, holidays pass, her parents' birthdays pass, everything. And she doesn't call, she doesn't show up. There's no word from her. And they start to lose hope again. And it seems like something really horrific has happened to her. So she went missing July 9th of 2007. And they did not know what happened to her until 2010 when her body was found on the beach. And her body was found restrained with 3 leather belts, and it was very clear that this was a homicide. It was not an accidental death. It was not a suicide. It was very clearly a homicide. Melissa was 24 years old and was from Erie County in New York, but lived in the Bronx at the time that she disappeared. And she used the alias Chloe when she worked. And she went missing on July 12th of 2009. So 2 years after Maureen had gone missing. The night that she went missing, she had tried to call an old boyfriend, but the call never went through for whatever reason. We also know that she met with a client at some point in the night, and then she deposited $900 into her bank. And then she just disappeared. A week after she went missing, her younger sister Amanda, who was still a kid at this point, started getting phone calls from Melissa's phone. And it wasn't Melissa, it was a man on the phone. And the man would call and mock and insult Melissa, and he even asked Amanda if she was a whore like her sister. These calls continued for over 5 weeks. Amanda is missing her sister. She's potentially mourning the loss of her sister. She has no idea what's happened to her. She's worried for her health and her safety. And instead of getting any answers or help from the police, all she's getting are these taunting, horrific, graphic calls for weeks from this guy from Melissa's phone. So it doesn't really seem like Melissa is okay. And that's a horrible, horrible, torturous thing that she's having to go through. Again, the calls continued for weeks. They get more vulgar and more aggressive. And towards the end, he told Amanda that Melissa was dead and he was going to watch her rot. The police did get involved at some point, and they did try to track the calls, and they learned that some of them came from Madison Square Garden or Manorville, but they couldn't figure out who was calling, and they really couldn't narrow it down any closer than that. And Melissa's body was actually the first body found that was wrapped in burlap the first day that they were searching for Shannon. Megan Waterman was 22 and she was from Maine. She was staying at a motel in New York, 15 miles from Gilgo Beach when she went missing. She went missing on June 6th of 2010, placing an ad on Craigslist as an escort as well. She told her boyfriend that she was going out, but she would call him later, and he never ended up hearing from her again. 2 days after she went missing, she was supposed to check in on her 3-year-old daughter who was in the care of some family members. And again, Megan was a very committed mom. She loved her daughter. She never missed a check-in. And so when she didn't show up and she didn't check on her daughter, they immediately filed a missing persons report on June 8th of 2010. At the time, unfortunately, not a lot happened in the search for her, but when the police are investigating later, when they find all 4 bodies on Gilgo Beach, police end up learning during that investigation that she actually was a victim of trafficking and that her boyfriend was involved in that. And so he was arrested, but they don't think he's involved or connected in her disappearance or death. So she was also a victim of his. He is not the one that killed her. And she went missing on June 6th of 2010. And it was actually on her birthday that the family found out in December of 2010 that she was positively ID'd, thanks to DNA, as one of the bodies on Gilgo Beach. They found out on her birthday. Amber Lynn Costello was the 4th woman found on Gilgo Beach, and she was 27 at the time that she went missing. She lived in West Babylon, New York, which was kind of like a small town close to Gilgo Beach. And she went missing on September 2nd of 2010, and she had gone to meet with a stranger who had called her several times during the day, offering her $2,500 for her services. Initially, when she didn't show back up, her family actually thought she'd gone to a drug rehab center, so they didn't report her missing because she had struggled with drug addiction. And so unfortunately, there was a delay in reporting her missing. The police haven't taken any of the other cases seriously, so they probably wouldn't have taken her disappearance seriously either. After they found their bodies on the beach, the police interviewed her roommate and got a description of the guy that had hired her. They actually said that one of her customers had like a bunch of red flags, and this guy was like a scary dude, and he probably was the one that hurt her. They said that he had a first generation Chevrolet Avalanche, that Amber had been hired by this guy, and she had said she was just going to dance, that he was not going to get any from her. And when he came over to get her to dance for him, she ended up calling her friend and saying that she was hiding in the bathroom because he wasn't taking no for an answer. So the two of her friends, and I think they were her roommates and friends, bust in and find her in the bathroom. She says like the guy is still here, and they find him in the house. And they say that this guy was huge. I think they even described him as like an ogre. They said that this guy said he wanted his money back, and they said, no, get out of here. You're like being disgusting and creepy. Get out of here. And so they end up finally threatening to let their dog on him, and they had a pit bull, and so he finally left, and he said, I'll see you. And they said that it was like he was staring past the roommates at her, kind of like in a menacing way. And they ended up reporting it to the police at the time that this happened, but the police never followed up with it. And so once she goes missing and then her body is found on the beach, they obviously immediately are going to think of that guy. Unfortunately, even with the description and the details that the roommates give them about this guy, they don't really follow up with it. They don't look into the car, they don't look into any of the details, and that interview basically doesn't help at all because the police don't do a good enough job with it. And Shannon's mom is still looking for Shannon. And remember that now these 4 women have been discovered because of Mary's search for Shannon. That's the only reason these 4 women were discovered. And so the 4 victims' families plus Shannon's mom all end up becoming very close during the fight for justice for their children. And again, Shannon is still missing, and unfortunately, even though they have more evidence and they have these 4 bodies, and you would think that that would lead to more answers, it really doesn't. And they are no closer to finding Shannon. They have no idea where she is, and they don't even know if she's linked to these 4 women. The parents and Mary seem to think that they are linked, but the police aren't necessarily convinced at this point. The police did realize, though, that in between Maureen and Melissa's disappearances was a 2-year gap. And then in between Melissa and Megan's disappearances was a 1-year gap. But what's scary is that in between Megan and Amber's disappearance, it was only 3 months. So this guy is actively escalating. His timelines are getting closer together. And they found them in December, and Amber had gone missing in September. So that means he was active at least 4 months ago. And they know that Maureen had been missing for 3 years. So now they know that they have some guy who's been active for at least 3 years and is still active right now. They had no idea that there's some serial killer out there. So this is when the FBI gets involved, and they end up giving a profile from the BAU, the Behavioral Analysis Unit. And they say, based on their profile, they think that this guy is a white male, probably in his 40s. He's probably good at social situations and blends into the community well. He might even have a family, but they don't think that the women are being killed at the beach. They think they're being murdered somewhere else and dumped at the beach, which means he needs an isolated place to torture and kill these women. So he probably needs some place that's isolated. So if he has a family, he is probably abducting and killing these women when his family is out of town. So they hope that this profile can help the police kind of narrow down who this potential killer could be. And so now that they have an FBI profile, they are realizing that there's a serial killer here who has not even been on their radar. There's a very scary guy that they're dealing with. They are taking this more seriously. And the documentary goes into this more. I'm not going to talk about this too much on this video, but during this time, there's a lot of drama and actually illegal activity or something like that going on with the police chief. And during this time, there's just a ton of negligence. It really harmed the investigation. And honestly, they probably cost some of the later victims their lives because they should have been searching for this guy a lot earlier, and they just were too wrapped up in their own things. So finally, on March 29th of 2011, they start searching for Shannon again. And this is now the spring. She was missing the entire winter. The ground was frozen. Things were kind of hard to search. They decide to research in the spring when the ground is thawed, and they bring the cadaver dog back out, and again they are doing a thorough search, and this time it is much more thorough than it was before, and Shannon's case is being taken much more seriously. And they know that 2 of the girls that they found on Gilgo Beach actually had gone missing after Shannon had called 911 and after Shannon had gone missing. So they know that if they had pursued Shannon's disappearance and taken it more seriously, they might have prevented at least 2 of these women's deaths and potentially more. So as the dogs are searching, they end up finding more remains on Ocean Parkway along Gilgo Beach. They find multiple more bodies. On March 29th, they find 1 body. On April 4th, they find 3 more bodies. And on April 11th, a week later, they find 2 more. That is 10 bodies within 12 miles of beach. 2 months, 10 bodies, and none of them are Shannon. The first set of remains they are able to identify, and they belong to Jessica Taylor, who was 20 when she went missing from Manhattan, and she went missing July 21st of 2003. That means that this guy has been active 7 years before they found any of the bodies. So she had gone missing while she was working. She was also an S worker, and they actually only found part of her remains on the beach in 2011. And while they are investigating, they realized that back in 2003, right after she had gone missing, her torso had actually been discovered off of Halsey Manor Road in Manorville. But at the time, because it was partial remains, they weren't able to identify her. So it wasn't until they found the rest of her remains in 2011 that they were able to connect that parts of her body have been dumped in multiple different places. And they are noticing that not only are all of these women S workers, they're also very petite. They are ranging from like 4 to 5 feet tall. Like, they're not very tall women. They're all in their 20s and they're all S workers. The next 3 bodies that they had found were an unidentified woman, an unidentified female toddler, and a male victim, and the male victim was dressed in drag. And so they believe the male victim was Asian and he was in his 20s. And they also had 2 more bodies that were unidentified at this point. So that's 5 unidentified victims. And again, 10 victims on the beach, 5 identified, 5 unidentified, and Shannon is still missing. So Mary and the police are still very much now searching for Shannon. And they decide to look for her where she had last been seen based on some of the eyewitness reports. They had last seen her near some marsh near the beach, and they had not ever searched this before because the marsh was a difficult and kind of dangerous area to search. But thanks to Mary and the other families putting pressure on the police, there was a lot of media and public pressure, and the case got more intense. So finally, the police decided to search the marsh almost 11 months after Shannon had gone missing. And again, this is when everything was thawing. The marsh was kind of a dangerous area to search. As they were searching, some of the people would just take one step and all of a sudden they would sink up to their chests in the marsh. It's just kind of a treacherous area. It would be very easy to get stuck and drown or die in this marsh. So as they are searching, they end up finding her jeans, shoes, pocketbook, and even her ID. On December 13th of 2011, on the 1-year anniversary of the Gilgo 4 being discovered, they find the 11th body. And this time it is Shannon. Her body was naked, and it was quite a ways away from her belongings in the marsh. Some people think that she had gotten stuck in the marsh and accidentally drowned, but why would she be naked? There's no way you can take jeans off when they're wet easily. She probably would not have done that willingly. And in the documentary, they do mention that there is a phenomenon when you get hypothermic where sometimes people will remove their clothes because they get so cold their body thinks they're hot and they start to like panic and remove clothing. So that is one theory, but I don't think that's the case. I think her clothes were forcefully removed. I don't think she removed them herself. Even without the phone call, I would assume at this point that she was a victim of the serial killer. And with that phone call where she is saying that someone is chasing her and she is in danger, it solidifies for me even more that this was not an accidental death. She was murdered. Unfortunately, her cause of death was undetermined though, based on the autopsy. And so they end up bringing in another guy to do another autopsy, and he had worked on like other high profile cases in the past. And he said that her death was inconsistent with natural causes and it looked more like a homicide and strangulation. So finally, Mary is able to know where her daughter's remains are. Unfortunately, they still don't know who did this, and they still don't know if this guy is out there doing this to other women. Years go by as they are searching for this guy, and unfortunately, there's just not a lot of evidence for them to go on. And they are actively looking into this case. They're taking it seriously, but again, years go by before they really get any other answers. In 2014, a man by the name of John Bittroff was brought in for the murder of 2 known prostitutes in the area. These are the 2 that had gone missing before they found the Gilgo 4 that I mentioned earlier. They were Rita Tangretti and Colleen McNamee, and they thought he had maybe killed a 3rd S worker, and her name was Sandra Castilla. But they didn't find any DNA or conclusive evidence, and so they think Sandra might be a victim of the Gilgo killer. And then as he's arrested and they're thinking that Sandra could either be his victim or the killer of the Gilgo Beach murders, then some people start to have theories that maybe this John guy is the Gilgo Beach killer. And so now some people are thinking that maybe all of these are connected. However, they eventually established that the John guy is not the same guy as the Gilgo Beach killer. And so these are just 2 different guys that both targeted S workers at similar times. December 10th of 2015, the FBI officially joined the search after the former police chief had been indicted for civil rights violations. So unfortunately, again, there's really not a lot for them to go on. And even though they do have some evidence, because of the incompetence and the basically neglect of the evidence that was given to the police the first time around, they have really nothing to go off of. And so for almost 8 years, there's no advancements in the case. It's not until 2023, so 2 years ago, that Jane Doe number 3 was ID'd, and her name was Karen Vergata, and she had been 34 when she was killed. It is believed that she was an S worker in Manhattan, and she had disappeared in 1996. It took 27 years for them to ID her. They learned around the time they had ID'd her that her legs had actually been found in a garbage truck back in 1996. They just never were able to figure out who her legs belonged to at the time. So it wasn't until they found her skull and teeth on Gilgo Beach that they connected her to the legs that were found in the garbage back in the 1990s. Additionally, there was a woman and a female toddler that were unidentified on the beach that had been found on April 11th. And after DNA analysis, and they took some of the jewelry that they were both wearing and were able to see that it matched, it was gold jewelry that matched, they established that the woman and the toddler were related, and likely it was the toddler's mother. The Jane Doe had been found dismembered in a plastic bag. It was only partial remains, and they realized that her torso had also been discovered back in June of 1997, and her torso had been found in Hampstead Lake State Park in New York in a green Rubbermaid container. So 2 more years passed, and it wasn't until April 23rd of 2025, this year, only a couple months ago, that they finally are able to ID her thanks to DNA. And Baby Doe as her 2-year-old daughter, Tatiana Dykes. And they think they probably went missing in 1997, but they aren't 100% sure. This case had kind of taken like a back burner. It had started to go cold just because there wasn't a lot of new evidence. So the police decide to bring this case to the public's attention. They start to show photos of the belt used to bind Maureen, one of the first victims that was found in the Gilgo Beach 4. On the belt, it had either an HM or a WH engraved on the belt, and they said that they believed that belt was the suspects and not the victim. So they were hoping that someone would recognize the belt and maybe come forward and identify whoever they knew had the belt. Additionally, they end up going back over old evidence, old police reports, old interviews. As they are going back over the information, realizing how absolutely neglectful the original police on this case were, they realize that they have multiple different eyewitness reports describing who they think is this guy, and no one ever pursued these leads. Amber Lynn Costello's roommates had described him. They realized that this description had been completely overlooked. And so they look at this description, and they had said that he was a huge guy, like 6'4" to 6'6" in height, said that he had a first generation Chevy Avalanche. And this is not a super common car. When they had said this to the police initially, they should have immediately looked up that car, and this could have been over so much sooner, but they didn't. And they find one guy that matches the description, and he lives in the area where some of the victims' phones had been pinging before they went missing. He fit the profile in pretty much every way. In March of 2022, they actually had gotten a name. His name was Rex Herman, and he had worked as an architect. And they were able to trace the burner phones that had been used to be in touch with the victims and the families. And then they also were able to track Rex's movement, that his personal phone movements and the burner phone movements always went together. So they were like, this is definitely the guy. They didn't have him as an official suspect yet. This was back in 2022 when they started to look at him as a suspect. At one point, while they were surveilling him, they end up watching him discard a pizza box into a public trash can. And so they end up collecting this and getting DNA from his pizza. And they end up using that DNA to match some hair strands that they had found on some of the victims when they originally had found them. So on July 13th of 2023, Rex was arrested and was indicted for many of the murders. And it wasn't until 2025 that they kind of came out with this information. And I know that the timeline of some of this is kind of confusing. Honestly, I was kind of confused with when they arrested him versus when they went public with some of this information. But he is indicted in 2023 and 2024. Currently, in 2025, they are getting ready for trial, but it likely won't officially start until 2026. 24, Rex was also charged with the murder of Sandra Costilla. That was the woman who originally they thought might have been the other killer's third victim. She was 28 when he killed her in 1993, and she was likely his first victim. So now it's more than 30 years that he has been doing this, that he has been active and undetected. They also know that the Asian doe that was in drag had died of blunt force trauma. They have never been able to identify them. We know they were biologically male, but they had been found in women's clothing, so maybe they were transgender, or maybe they were just dressed in drag. We aren't really sure. They were somewhere between the age of 17 to 23, and they have created both male and female presenting sketches for this victim in hopes that someone will come forward and recognize them and identify them. So in 2024, when they arrested him, they searched his home, his vehicle, his backyard, literally everything, and they found almost 300 individual firearms in his basement. 300 different firearms. That's an insane amount. None of them seem like they were linked to any of the murders. He just had these for fun, I guess. They also got his phones, computers, and more, and found that many of the searches on many of his different devices were revolving around the victims or their families or their murders. And then they also found some really disturbing. Rex Herman, by the way, had a family. He had children, and they are able to go back and look at his movements and then his family's movements and see when his family was traveling without him. And they are able to see that even though he's married and had kids, he is able to kill, because every single time they go out of town is when he would take a victim, he would torture them, he would kill them, he would dump them before his family got back. So they were always out of town when he was killing. They had no idea that he was doing this. And he had at least 11 victims, if not more. And the discovery of all the bodies and the ability to link them to one serial killer is mostly credited to Mary for advocating for her daughter Shannon and basically forcing the police to go look for her daughter. Even though she was brutally killed, she is a hero because she brought so many answers and so much closure to so many people. As they were searching for her, they found answers for so many other families that otherwise would never have had answers to what happened to their loved ones. According to one of the family attorneys, John Ray, told People magazine, quote, "Shannon will be remembered for the girl who, by her death, exposed the truth and the killer. What Shannon's case did is force the authorities to finally pursue the evidence for the other girls. Shannon kept the pressure on for all of these years, even though she is dead," end quote. To this day, they have not officially linked Shannon to this killer because her cause of death was never officially ruled as a homicide. Obviously, I think that Shannon is one of his victims. That seems like the most obvious conclusion. Anyone with information about Shannon Gilbert is asked to contact Crime Stoppers at this number. I'll put it on the screen so that you guys can see. Again, Shannon's mom, Mary, is credited to the discovery of the Gilgo bodies because of how much she pushed to search for her daughter. Unfortunately, Mary passed before they found Rex and got some answers as to who potentially killed Shannon. Mary was found stabbed to death in her apartment at age 52 in 2019, and she was stabbed by her own daughter. And Megan Waterman's mom, Lorraine, who also was very active in the search for justice for her daughter and was friends with Mary and the other moms, she also passed away. Both of these women never got to see the killer arrested. They never got to see justice for their children. Currently, Rex Herman is being charged with 7 different murders. Not all of them he is being charged with right now, unfortunately. He is clearly a horrible, disgusting, despicable human, and I'm very, very hopeful that people find him guilty. He is put away for the rest of his life, and he never hurts another woman in his lifetime.
Today on History You Should Know, one of the most highly requested topics ever, probably because there's an upcoming movie. This is the story of the Manhattan Project and J. Robert Oppenheimer. Tap on the playlist below to access all history episodes. Sit on your throne, relax, and enjoy the video in all its glory. 1938, 2 German scientists named Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann achieved something no one has ever done before. They split the uranium atom. Bakit ito importante? Okay, quick science class. Since the Greeks, people believed that the smallest component of all matter is the atom. The word atomos was coined by Democritus. It means uncuttable or indivisible. Pero pagdating ng 20th century, naisip ng mga scientists, paano kung may mas maliit pa sa atom? They were right. Through the years, the 3 subatomic particles were discovered: electrons, protons, and neutrons. And then the question became, what if the atom could be split? Sa gitna ng atom, may nucleus. Sa loob nito, may protons, positively charged particles, at neutrons. Those are the ones with no charge. At sa labas ng nucleus, may electrons, the negatively charged particles. Eventually, scientists learned that the way to split an atom is to bombard it with neutrons. Yun mismo ang nagawa ni Hahn at Strassmann. They split the atom of uranium-235 by bombarding it with neutrons. And the process released a large amount of energy in the form of heat and radiation. This process is called nuclear fission. In the minds of a couple of scientists, with further research, this spelled out potential super weapon. And since the discovery was made by Germans, they assumed that it would fall into the hands of the Third Reich. Nang magsimula ang World War II noong 1939, a group of physicists convinced a man named Albert Einstein to co-write a letter to US President Roosevelt, telling him that this is a promising field to explore and it's better if they get it before the Germans. But since it's 1939 and the US wasn't in the war, it was funded but not prioritized. Nagbago lahat yan matapos ang Pearl Harbor noong December 1941. By 1942, fearing Germany had more than a 3-year head start, the US went all in on creating atomic weapons. The project had a name, the Manhattan Project. Bakit? Kasi technically, sa Manhattan talaga ang office, pero ang tunay na research sa iba't ibang lugar nangyayari. If a spy looked for it in Manhattan, all they'd find was an office and basically nothing. But they had a security problem. Secrets would be passed between cities using military personnel with briefcases handcuffed to them. Easy to intercept and extremely risky. They needed a place where everyone could work together in close proximity 24/7. Enter Lieutenant General Leslie Groves, a man known as an exceptional project leader because of his organizational skills. He just oversaw the construction of the Pentagon, and now he was put in charge of the Manhattan Project. And his first job was to choose a lead scientist to oversee the research side of the whole project. He picked J. Robert Oppenheimer. This guy was a different level of smart. He came from a rich German Jewish immigrant family. Once, he was invited to give a lecture to the New York Geological Society because of his papers. When he got to the lecture with his dad, the people who invited him said, "Thank you for coming," to the dad. They didn't know that Oppenheimer was actually 12 years old and the dad was just a chaperone. And yes, he gave the lecture. He was well-read and he loved poetry. At one point, he also found out that he was supposed to give a lecture in Dutch in the Netherlands, a language he didn't speak. So he learned the language and perfected it just in time for his lecture. What? It's also in the Netherlands where his students gave him his nickname Oppie. Eventually, Oppie fell in love with theoretical physics. This brilliant scientist was a bit of an enigma. He was charismatic yet socially awkward. He was able to inspire yet emotionally unstable at times. May isang storya, yung kaibigan daw ni Oppenheimer, sinabi sa kanya, "I'm getting married." And you know, as a friend, you'd usually be very happy for your friend, right? But Oppenheimer proceeded to strangle him. And when his friend fought him off, he just collapsed to the ground and started weeping. Speaking of friends, he had one major problem. The people closest to him were communists. But despite that, Groves selected him for his abilities, and Oppenheimer cut ties with these communist friends. Noong August 1942, inilipat ang Manhattan Project sa napiling lugar ni Inilipat ang Manhattan Project sa napiling lugar ni Oppenheimer, Los Alamos, New Mexico. A town in the middle of nowhere, far from city centers to avoid secrets leaking and fatal accidents. Oppenheimer recruited scientists from all over the country, and he was incredibly successful since his name carried a lot of weight. In no time, Los Alamos became a small city filled with engineers, scientists, and military personnel. It was all top secret. The creation of atomic weapons was fully underway. Okay, balik tayo sa science. Remember nuclear fission? For that to be weaponized, the process of splitting needs to happen in quick succession multiple times. Because once an atom splits, it would release those particles within, including neutrons. And if there are more similar atoms nearby and a projectile neutron hits it, it could then split that atom, and so on and so forth. That's called a chain reaction. But this could be random. For a bomb to work, a stable chain reaction needs to happen. This was solved by Enrico Fermi. He also worked on the Manhattan Project. This idea was the design of the world's first uranium atom bomb. Tinawag itong Little Boy. With the right amount of explosives acting like a gun, the explosion would destabilize the uranium-235 and cause the chain reaction they needed. Sure sila, this would work. Pero may isa pang bomba na hindi sila sigurado. Ang gamit naman doon, plutonium. This was a bigger problem for the scientists because they couldn't get it to work the same way as Little Boy. By 1944, the pressure on the scientists to deliver was at an all-time high. Then a year later, they thought an implosion, not an explosion, might work. But in order to ensure it works, they needed to test it. July 1945, Germany has surrendered. Only Japan stood in the way of the Allies. Sa bawat battle, pahirap ng pahirap ang laban dahil mas nagiging desperado na ang mga Hapon. Ayaw nilang sumuko at inihanda nila ang mga sibilyan na magsakripisyo. An American invasion of mainland Japan that was supposed to dwarf D-Day was being prepared, which means hundreds of thousands of casualties were expected. Around the same time, the scientists at Los Alamos were primed to test the plutonium bomb. This was the Trinity test. At this point, Oppenheimer had lost a significant amount of weight. Nabubuhay na lang siya sa sigarilyo at kape dahil sa stress. This was his moment of truth. All the years of his career have boiled down to this moment. July 16, 1945, 5:29 a.m. The desert sky was dark. When the clock struck 5:30, the whole landscape was bathed in a blinding light. Some witnesses said they saw the sunrise twice that day. The sky turned orange and then green and then purple, and the explosion sounded like booming thunder. At this moment, all of mankind was ushered into the atomic age. Oppenheimer and the scientists were relieved. They succeeded. Little boy would work, and now Fat Man was functional. But some of the members of the Manhattan Project had moral qualms about the bomb. Some left even before the test. Sadly, the decision to use the bomb was not up to them. That decision fell on US President Harry Truman. 2 bombs were dropped and an invasion was deemed unnecessary. Accounts state that after hearing news about Hiroshima, Oppenheimer entered the room showered with cheers and applause by members of the project. But later on, he strongly and publicly opposed the creation of a more powerful hydrogen bomb. Naging advocate siya ng peace. He urged collaboration among nuclear-capable countries for the survival of mankind. He also became a victim of the Red Scare because of his early connections with communists. I'm gonna leave it there. You'll have the movie or your own research to tell you what happened. But to end this video, I leave you with his most famous words, quoting the Bhagavad Gita: "I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." The discoveries of the Manhattan Project governs the modern world today. It provides an energy source, medicine, and at the same time, unimaginable destruction. Before, people believed only gods could destroy humans in that scale. But since 1945, man has had the ability to destroy humanity itself. The atomic age ushered in by Oppenheimer and the Manhattan Project has shaped human history in ways never before seen. Did we just do science and history in one video? Follow for more, and boom! Now you know. Can't wait to see Oppenheimer. Today on History You Should Know, a couple who met and got married on the same day and ruled over the world's most powerful country. This is the highly requested story, I'm sure because of Bridgerton, of King George III and Queen Charlotte. Tap on the playlist below to access all history episodes. Sit on your throne, relax, and enjoy the video in all its glory. London, 1760. Namatay ang hari ng England na si King George II. With his eldest son's death 9 years earlier, the task of continuing the line of the House of Hanover fell on the lap of his grandson, George. This young man was highly intellectual. He was a nerd, that's my jam, especially for science, and even had his own astronomical observatory. He had a strong sense of duty and loyalty. Pero gaya ng lahat ng hari, kailangan na niya ng reyna. The 22-year-old king had only a few requirements for his future queen. He didn't care too much about looks. He also wanted someone kind and intelligent, but one who was more dutiful than cunning, meaning someone who wouldn't intervene with his decisions as king or even possibly overthrow him. Enter Sophia Charlotte of Mecklenburg-Strelitz. The 17-year-old noble from Germany met every single one of his criteria, and so they met and married on the same day. Little did people know how this marriage would turn out to be special. History, and even modern musicals, have been too quick to write off George III as a failure, a cartoon, and a villain. You say the price of my love's not a price that you're willing to pay. Charlotte is also often overlooked. But if one looks at their history, a richer, more nuanced version of the couple comes to view. George and Charlotte set records for future monarchs. The king was popular among his people even after he lost America during their war for independence. He was a constitutional, not an absolute monarch. Ibig sabihin, hindi sa kanya galing ang lahat ng desisyon. Kasama niya ang parliament sa pamamahala ng gobyerno. He was also born and raised in England. Kahit German ang lahi niya, pinili niyang ipresenta ang sarili niya bilang English. And to show his commitment, he was the first Hanoverian king who spoke English. George I and II mainly spoke German. The monarchy's usual problem is producing an heir. Well, hindi nila naging problema yon. Queen Charlotte gave birth to 15 15 children, a record that stands to this day, with 13 reaching adulthood. Ibig sabihin, buntis siya at least once every year for almost 20 years. Her uterus was more productive than any meeting and any group project that I've ever been a part of combined. Charlotte also managed her family later on in life when the king was busy with state affairs. Another unique aspect of their marriage is how faithful they were to each other. Monarchs who came before would often have mistresses. Some would have one, some three, and some would have room to get divorced twice and have their spouse beheaded twice while changing the country's religion. That would lead to decades of killing and persecution in the process. Also, as soon as they got married, he bought her a property called Buckingham House. You might know it. But just when the story seems to be headed for a happy ending, problems started knocking on their door. Their sons, especially George, the Prince of Wales, was a constant troublemaker. The heir to the throne was a playboy and always got in trouble. This put him at odds with his father. Theme sa Hanoverian kings ang pagkakagalit ng tatay at anak. King George's father hated his grandfather and so on. And in 1788, the king suffered the first of multiple episodes of an unknown condition. Some experts say it was porphyria, a kind of blood disease. Later historians think it's an extreme form of bipolar disorder. To this day, it's still unknown. But whatever it was, it manifested as a mental breakdown that would make the king unable to work for extended periods of time. And it would also eventually overshadow some of the things that he did during his reign. During his earlier episodes, it came out as digestive issues that turned into bouts of mania. Nagdedeliryo siya at nakikipag-usap sa mga hayop at puno. He would talk to his officers and servants to make elaborate plans with very specific orders about people, places, and things that didn't exist. 1780s to ha, at wala pang masyadong kaalaman tungkol sa mental illness. So the doctors would try to cure him by leeching, blistering, and bloodletting because they thought it was coming from his blood. And the doctors also had a problem. They couldn't easily say mental illness because that would mean the king must step down and that will change the whole political landscape of Britain. But somehow, the king got better. Then 12 years later, it came back. It would come back multiple times to plague his reign and tarnish his legacy. Through it all, Queen Charlotte did her best to solve the situation. She took out the king in public on his good days to show that he was doing well. They would rejoice at the knowledge of his recovery. And because of this, the king stayed popular among his people. She also tried to play mediator between the king and his wayward son, George, Prince of Wales. Pero tao lang din ang reyna. She disapproved of any marriage for her daughters, even if it meant they would be happy and even if they were getting too old. Ngayon, syempre, hindi na malaking issue yon. But before, it was considered taboo, especially for royalty, to marry at a later age. Some say she did it for them to keep her company and to save them from the dangerous and ambitious people at court. But one of their daughters wouldn't even get the chance to be married. The king's youngest and favorite child, Princess Amelia, died in 1810. And this, even according to the king, was the final blow that his sanity could take. King George suffered his worst episode shortly after. One account says he once slept for 2 hours and upon waking continued talking for 19 hours straight until he started losing his voice and until he started foaming at the mouth. He wouldn't recognize real people and had make-believe meetings with imaginary members of his government. He also barely slept as he mumbled, whispered, and screamed 24/7. His cataracts were also taking away his eyesight. May episodes din siya ng physical aggression, taking it out on servants and once even scaring his own wife. As his condition got worse, the treatments also became more barbaric. Servants would have to sit on the king while he was on the floor so he wouldn't accidentally hurt himself or anyone else. They'd put him in something like a straitjacket and tie him to a chair. Sometimes they had to physically beat him up to get him to stop. 1800s doctors also tried to cure his cataracts by putting leeches on his eyes. Politically, kinailangang gawing regent ang anak at tagapagmanang si George, Prince of Wales, kahit magkaaway sila ng tatay niya. The tired, frightened, and heartbroken Queen Charlotte started visiting the king less often. They drifted apart, and there was nothing she could do, but she still stayed devoted. She would eventually see her daughters get married in their 30s, and in 1818, Queen Charlotte died at Q Palace on this very chair surrounded by her family. The most tragic part was how her husband, the man with whom she spent an entire life of devotion, now blind and consumed by madness, wasn't even able to comprehend or understand her death. King George III would die a little over a year later in 1820. The 60-year rule of King George III is the third longest in British history, surpassed only by two queens, his granddaughter Queen Victoria and the late Queen Elizabeth II. People unfairly remember him as the Mad King and the Tyrant King who lost America, when in fact, Britain saw massive change under him. Abolishing the slave trade, defeating Napoleon, never vetoing his parliament's decisions, giving such huge patronage to the arts and sciences. And Queen Charlotte was beside him through it all, for better or worse. Sometimes history can redeem certain figures by offering new perspectives with substantial evidence. I repeat, with substantial evidence. George and Charlotte are prime examples. He was a husband who was devoted to the crown, his wife, and his family for as long as he could. They were a symbol of loyalty, steadfastness, and commitment. Follow for more, and boom! Now you know.
Hey guys, get ready with me for my bestie's birthday dinner. So I totally forgot I could talk on here. I have never made a talking video except for one time, and then I got banned literally right after for being younger than 13. I'm 18, so. Okay, I just did my eyebrows. A lot of people have asked me what eyebrow gel I use. It's the Kosas Clear Eyebrow Gel, literally the best, most natural looking eyebrow gel, but my eyebrows don't move the entire day, so I love it. I have always wanted to make these kinds of videos. I just really need to get over the thought of people that I know seeing them, which is a really scary thing. I admire people who make these every single day because I've always wanted to do that. I just get nervous. I feel my comfort zone is making get ready with me videos that are just with music, or outfit videos, or just lip singing videos, but I need to get over this fear because this is so fun and I can actually speak. Nobody that follows me knows what I sound like, but now you know. Okay, my bronzer is doing this weird thing where it doesn't put any product on one area of my cheek. I feel this is the culprit, and I used to use this in Starglow, which is the best one. If you're gonna get anyone, get Starglow, but they haven't had it for months, so I got Warm Glow. And ever since then, my makeup just doesn't stick. Okay, I think I kind of fixed it, so I'm just gonna stop touching it, and hopefully my other products fix it a little bit. I have gotten so used to just doing my regular everyday makeup, which is the most boring routine ever. It's just bronzer, powder bronzer, concealer, and mascara, and powder and stuff. I forget how to do actual nice makeup, and it never turns out good. I've had to do nice makeup the past 2 days for 2 other occasions, and I was struggling. I feel nothing is looking right on my skin. Everything is patchy. In the end, it ends up looking nice, but while I'm doing it, it's so patchy, and I have blush blindness. Trust the process, everybody. Trust the process. Okay, anyways, let me stop talking about my makeup for a second. It's my friend's birthday dinner. Like I said, her birthday was yesterday. I'm so excited because, one, I'm really excited to see her, and I am excited to eat dinner. Also, I'm starving. I look crazy. Guys, did I fix it? Let me know. I think I fixed it. Yay. Oh, also guys, thank you so much for 96,000. I was at 80,000 like 5 days ago. That's insane. That's actually insane. Oh, I never showed you guys what I was wearing. This is what I'm wearing. It's basic, but I never know what to wear for dinner. I never know. I love picking everyday outfits. I hate picking dinner outfits. I stress about it every single time. I stress about everything though. I am using the Physicians Formula bronzer, a drugstore product, but it's literally the best bronzer. I don't know why nobody talks about it. It is the best bronzer. And this is the bronzer that I use in all my videos. Oh, a lot of people are asking what mascara I use. I use the L'Oreal Telescopic. also drugstore product, but literally the best mascara in the entire world. So I'm sorry if I'm talking way too much. Like, I promise I will get better at this, guys. I just like don't I don't know how to do it. The powder blush I just used is the Rare Beauty powder blush in the shade Happy, and it's so pretty and sparkly. Literally drench your face. What do people talk about in these videos? I don't know what to say. If you guys want me to make more of these, let me know. And if you're like, girl, please shut up, I will. I will. Because I don't know what to say. I kind of want to make a get to know me one because nobody knows me. Like, you just know my videos. So I do want to do a get to know me one. But I could give some fun facts right now. So I'm 18 years old. I am a Virgo. I don't know if that's relevant. I don't really know much about zodiac signs, but I feel like it's good knowledge to give people. I am Canadian. I love Taylor Swift. I'm an only child. I have a boyfriend, and we've been dating for a year and a half. And my favorite color is pastel yellow. And that's all you guys are gonna know for now. Sorry. This is my favorite going out lipstick. I only use this for special occasions. It is the Charlotte Tilbury Walk of Shame lipstick. Obviously it's a small one, but this girl is gonna last me forever. And boom. Just like that, the makeup is elevated. So the lip liner I use, this is my lip liner like always. It's the only lip liner I use. It's the Whipped Caviar NYX lip liner. Best lip liner ever. If I want a little bit of a gloss, put this right in the middle. And it is the Kosas Unbuttoned Lip Oil. Okay guys, I'm done getting ready. I think I was able to salvage the makeup like, well, it looks great. I ate. Anyways, I need to go now. So bye guys. Thank you so much for all the support recently. And I promise to make more of these if you guys want, like I said. If you don't want to hear from me again, don't worry about it.
Today on History You Should Know, we talk about one of the most mysterious figures to ever walk the face of the earth. To one family, a friend and healer. To some, a holy man. To others, the devil himself. This is the story of Grigory Rasputin. Trigger warning! Ang mahirap sa storya ni Rasputin, it's very difficult to separate fact from fiction. Pero kung libro siya, bawat chapter, the story just gets crazier and crazier. There's very little known about Rasputin's early life. He was a peasant from Siberia. He didn't like following the rules, so it's not surprising that he was jailed for being rude to an official. He also had a wife, Praskovia Dubrovina, and 3 children. In his early 20s, he found his way to religion. Pumasok siya sa isang monasteryo at dun niya na-discover ang Klists. Have to be careful when saying that. They were a secret and unrecognized sect of the Russian Orthodox Church, whose aim is to achieve grace through ecstatic rituals. Some say that just meant having orgies. But some of these ideas would be adopted by Rasputin. He believed that holy passionlessness or sexual exhaustion would bring us closer to God. Kailangan mong magkasala para mapalapit kay Lord. In 1897, at age 28, Rasputin decided to leave his family and go on a religious pilgrimage. Dahil walang edukasyon sa mga mahihirap, some people did this to serve as their school. Learn by exploring the world. He would walk an average of 30 miles a day. So yeah, he met his step goal every single day, relying only on people offering him a place to stay or food. Kung wala, matutulog siya sa labas at hindi siya kakain. And these pilgrimages were no joke. This dude traveled to Jerusalem and Greece. At dito niya nabuo ang reputasyon ng pagiging healer at self-proclaimed holy man. And he's not an ordained priest, but that didn't matter to people. His following just grew and grew. And most of them were women, and he was allegedly very touchy with them. And one day, he took his pilgrimage to St. Petersburg. Speaking of St. Petersburg, Tsar Nicholas and Tsarina Alexandra, you might know them from my previous video, were in the middle of reigning the Russian Empire. At this point, Nikki was busy sucking at being the Tsar. Russia was rapidly changing, and the divide between the elites and the masses was growing wider each day. But Nikki being Nikki, he was more worried about his family than these peasants. By 1901, meron na silang 4 na anak, all girls. But the way for the Romanov line to continue is through a male heir. Kahit na heavily heavily religious ang Russia at that time. A lot of people were fascinated with mysticism and spiritualism, especially the elites, since mysticism gave them the confidence that they are entitled to the power that they have. Plus, it was a good distraction in a chaotic time for the country. Saktong-sakto sa pangangailangan ng indecisive at out-of-touch na leader na si Nicholas. In 1904, the long-awaited son, Alexei, was born. But he was born with hemophilia, a rare genetic disorder that doesn't allow your blood to clot normally. Sugat o pasalang pwede maging sobrang sakit o pwede niya ikamatay. Enter Rasputin. In 1906, he met the royal family through some of the Tsar's family members. There was an instant connection between the monk and the royal couple. And soon, he was put in charge of Alexei's health. He believed in his ability to heal Alexei. And the freaky thing is, somehow, it worked. Some say Alexei just felt better by having him around. Pero sabi rin ng ibang historian, it's because of aspirin. At the time, doctors would prescribe aspirin for everything, so it's likely that they prescribed aspirin to Alexei. But aspirin has blood-thinning effects, so it was making him worse. So when Rasputin told the doctors, stop treating him, no more aspirin. So that may be the reason why he started feeling better. This is when the royal family started to trust him completely. Rasputin's talent was his ability to calm and reassure people. That's because of his charisma, persuasiveness, and adamant faith, not only to God, but in himself. This is what made him seem supernatural. He would end up assuring the nervous Nicholas about his abilities as a leader and the nervous Alexandra about the health of her son, hanggang sa naging dependent ang royal family kay Rasputin. So Grigory Rasputin went from peasant to wandering holy man to the most infamous man in Russia. Being that close to the royal family, the insane rumors, both good and bad, some true, some exaggerated, couldn't be avoided. He allegedly had affair after affair with various women and formed kind of a sex therapy den. Women would line up at his house and they would consult with him. He would calm and reassure them with his demeanor and those hypnotic pale green eyes. And remember, sinning is the way to God. Some accounts claim hearing moaning from the bedroom while the other women were awkwardly waiting, sipping tea outside. And there was also this rumor that he had a legendary sexual appetite. Others also threw rape accusations at him. In short, he didn't have a good reputation. Now, what would good leaders do when they are linked to somebody like this? They would distance themselves to protect their image and the public's perception. Well, as we already know, Nicholas was not a good leader. Remember when I said this? One day, Alexandra suggested to Nikki that he should lead the war from the front. This was Rasputin's suggestion. So instead of Nikki sending Rasputin away, Nicholas just left his capital in the middle of a crisis. In his absence, guess who took charge of the country? Alexandra and Rasputin, who by now in the public's eyes is either a German spy or a sex-crazed wizard puppet master controlling Russia through the royal family. And because of this reputation, the public thought that the Tsarina and Rasputin were having an affair while Nicholas was away. This was never proven, but the public's perception has already judged the Tsar. With the public getting more and more frustrated, one group started to panic, the elites. Kung magkaroon ng revolution, sila ang unang mawawala ng kapangyarihan. Enter Felix Yusupov, a relative of the Tsar who is the epitome of everything the people hated about the nobility. Lazy, entitled, abusive, and only there because of his family. And he also believed that it's his destiny to save the monarchy. How? By killing the problem, Rasputin. By this point, a peasant woman already tried to assassinate Rasputin. She believed he was the devil, but he survived. But now, a rich man with resources plotted to murder him. What happens next is probably what cemented Rasputin's status as a legendary, mysterious figure. What's widely known about this event is mostly the account of Felix Yusupov himself. Felix invited Rasputin to a party at his house. He and his co-conspirators prepared cake and wine and laced them with potassium cyanide. The dose was said to be enough to kill multiple men. Pagdating ni Rasputin, he ate multiple cakes and drank the wine. And to Felix's horror, this this seemed to not affect him at all. So Yusupov took a gun and shot Rasputin multiple times, including once in the heart. When he went to the next room to announce what he did, they wanted to celebrate and congratulate themselves for saving Russia. So they'll just deal with the body later. But Felix wanted to double check, so he went back to the cellar to check if he was dead. And the next thing he knew, Rasputin opened his eyes and started clawing at him. He ran after him and then out onto the courtyard, screaming like a wounded animal. And there outside, he was shot again, including a bullet to the head. They believed that did it. So they tied up his arms and threw his body into the river. Days later, the monk's body was found under the ice, and his hands weren't tied. It looked like he was able to break free. They found water in his lungs, which indicates that he drowned to death, which means he didn't die after being shot in the head. Damn! And there were competing claims when the autopsy came out. Apparently, there was no poison in his system. Some accounts also claimed that there was no water found in his lungs. But no matter what the actual events were, this didn't solve the weak and out-of-touch leadership of Nicholas. Apparently, he was terrible, with or without Rasputin. Then the Russian Revolution happened and, well, you know the rest. Years later, some historians started claiming that some of the accusations leveled against Rasputin were brought about by jealousy. Maraming walang ebidensya. That's also because investigative journalism was either not yet born or not yet that popular. That's my next story. But for me, the most important takeaway from this story is the problem of blind belief and fanaticism. Nicholas was so blind and out of touch with reality that he didn't care about the power of image and how associating with someone viewed as the devil himself would harm his family's reputation. They didn't know what to prioritize, nor did they care very much about the people they were supposed to govern. Minsan makikita mo na lang talaga na ginawa nilang scapegoat si Rasputin. The elites, the ones in power, they made him an excuse because it was convenient. In the end, keeping Rasputin was just the last straw on top of all his bad decisions. Rasputin's story is part occultism, part history, part murder mystery, and part conspiracy theory. And his story is still pretty much shrouded in mystery. No wonder people are drawn to it even more than a century later. That's all. Hope you learned something. Follow for more, and boom! Now you know.